Alright everybody, we are back. I am officially doing a third one of these, which I guess makes it a series. Welcome back. We are working our way through Machiavelli's Discourses. This is the third part. From now on I will be pointing out which discourses he's claiming to reference. These are kind of like chapter references in the book. Just so you know. So in the original Italian, or the original book, they're done by these subsections. So for those of you who want to reference it, this makes it easier. Today we are going to be going a short one. We'll do religion. Although I've already prepared part 4, which will be coming a weeknight this week when I have enough voice. I don't want to run my voice out today quite yet. I had to do some public speaking today on my off day, so I'm not going to push it too hard, but I want to get one of these out there to keep that habit going. And I actually read the book already. I think it was a couple days back, so it's still fresh. I want to get this out. But yeah, we're going to get into religion now. For those of you who've not watched this before, we're going through this book, which is technically a discourse on the Roman Empire, but he uses it to make, Machiavelli uses this to make commentary on modern Italy and modern Europe. By modern I mean like 15th and 16th century. So Renaissance Italy and Europe. So there'll be some stuff in here that's a little bit edgy today. It'll be fun. Alright, so this chapter is on the Romans. And this first section is concerning the religion of the Romans. So kind of Machiavelli's thoughts about it. And he says, through the first person to give Rome a constitution was Romulus, and he mentions he couldn't pass Rome to it. The first successor was Numa Pompilius, who became the person who also instituted the religion. It said, Numa, finding the people ferocious and desiring to reduce them to civic obedience by means of the art of peace, turned religion as the instrument necessary above all others for the maintenance of a civilized state. So a big point here, they both popped up, sorry about that, but the first one he makes is, and it said, so constituted, there was never need for so many centuries for a great fear of God as there was in this republic. So the religion, and remember Machiavelli is a Catholic, but he's writing practically as well. And he points out that the Romans saw religion necessary to make a civil state and to maintain it and to unify, as he said, right, a ferocious people. You can make a lot of parallels with this to the Germans, actually. And most Germanic tribes, right, religion made them focus their ferociousness, specifically Christianity, but it also worked for the Romans. And there's a need here for appropriateness of honor. Now, what does this mean? He gives several examples of how this worked out, and how like religion solved disputes between several people. But the conclusion he makes here, is there any interesting ones? Let's see. Anyone know? No, they're pretty obscure characters. But they talk about after the defeat at Cannae, many citizens got together and, despairing from their fatherland, decided to abandon Italy and to transfer themselves to Sicily. When Scipio heard this, he sought them out, sword in hand, and forced them to swear they would not abandon their country. And remember, this is a time when you say to swear, it's make an oath to the gods. That's the only thing swear ever meant. So you're making a promise. So what's wrong with swear words? You're making oaths, right? To oath was to swear, which is, you shouldn't do that lightly, right? Because if you do and break it, like the gods will come get you. So this leads to basically kind of a main point here. So if you have a strong religious thing, suddenly oaths matter, right? Things you promise are things you will do. So this is all nothing else that. So religion leads straight up to honor. And again, even some of the Catholic saints point out what Rome did right. Rome focused on honor, which is a non-physical good, and tends to be, when you focus on non-physical goods, like not just money and power, you're more successful. And Machiavelli, that is definitely a sub-point of his as well. Even in The Prince, right? The Prince is his other book, which is considered to be the more realpolitik one. He says in there, you need to be virtuous or at least appear it, right? So looking like you focus on non-physical goods is important. Now he says here, it also be seen those who pay attention to Roman history, how much religion helped control the armies. What's here? Encouraged the plebs. It produced good men and shamed the bad. Now that's important, right? It does all those things. So your armies don't always rebel. Your plebs work for something, right? Regular people. You can make good men and you shame the bad. This is, modern people forget this, right? Religion does all of these things together, right? You have unity in your armies. Your regular people aren't depressed. I mean, look at right now, right? We live in despair season of corona and political upheaval. So you discourage plebs is a negative, right? Same thing with, you want good men. Remember, good means moral, upstanding, honest, honorable men. And shame the bad, right? Shame, and this thing, shame is a good in a traditional or even well-functioning society. No shame means there's no judgment for bad behavior, means everything degrades. It's just what happens. All right, I want to make sure I'm doing this. Okay, yeah, that's exactly what I wanted. I'm just always double checking my PowerPoints to make sure the next point that comes up. Okay, and this quote was so good, I had to read it. For where there is religion, it is easy to teach men the use of arms. But where there are arms, but no religion, it is with difficulty that it can be introduced. Thus one sees that in establishing the Senate and introducing other civic and military institutions, Romulus did not find it necessary to appeal to divine authority, but the next guy did. So there's a certain amount of religion makes it easier to teach men to use arms. So arms alone aren't useful, and there's been a lot of jokes against libertarians lately, or anybody who talks about armed action. Armed action is irrelevant without a uniform set of ideas, and religion are the most powerful uniform set of ideas. Not that, it beats ideology every time. Okay. Now, this is one of his most famous quotes. People who've never read Discourses know this one, and it's to have to do with mountain men and city dwellers, but I'm going to read the whole thing. Talking about the Romans, it says, marveling, therefore, in Numa's goodness and prudence, the Roman people accepted all his decision. True, the times were so impregnated with religious spirit, and men with whom he had to deal were so stupid, they contributed very much to facilitate his designs, and make it easy for him to impress them any new form. Doubtless, too, anyone seeking to establish a republic at the present time would find it easier to do so among uncultured men of the mountains than among the dwellers in the cities where civilization is corrupt, just as a sculptor will more easily carve a beautiful statue from rough marble than from marble already spoiled by a bungling workman. You're always better off founding with kind of like just regular honest folk. And Machiavelli's big theme of this book, the virtue of the people really matters, the corrupt or uncorruptness. And this is the first chapter he starts to get into it, but this will lead directly into the next chapter as well. All right, and he even attributes this so much to the primary cause of Rome's success. He says here, all things considered, therefore, I conclude that the religion introduced by Numa, this was the second founder of Rome, basically, among the primary causes of Rome's success, for this entailed good institutions. Good institutions led to good fortune, and from good fortune arose the happy results of undertakings. And here we go. And as the observance of divine worship is the cause of greatness in republics, so the neglect of it is the cause of their ruin. Did I have that on here? I did not. So think about that, right? So why is Machiavelli not studied right now? Because he points out, to have a successful republic, you need religion. Can you imagine why that is an unpopular opinion right now in the academy? I can, right? But he says it straight up. And why? He says it here, because where the fear of God is wanting, it comes about either that a kingdom is ruined, or that it is kept going by fear of a prince, which makes up for the lack of religion. And because princes are short-lived, this is true in history too, they always are, it may well happen that when a kingdom loses its prince, it loses all the virtue of the prince. Hence kingdoms which depend on virtue of one man do not last long, because they lose their virtue once his life is spent. And it seldom happens that it is revived by successor. So as Dante wisely remarked, rarely to the branches does human worth ascend, for 'tis the will of its donor, that men may recognize it as his gift. It doesn't commonly climb the tree. Welcome. So, if you can't have good princes all the time, it's better to have religious people and religious princes that make good men, because then everybody's a good man. You don't need one exceptional prince. This should give hope to anybody, regardless of affiliation. If you're trying to reform a state, right? If you can reform the people, you're on your way there. All right. Finally, part of this is the prudential setting up of a decent system. And he says it here. The security of a republic or a kingdom, therefore, does not depend on its ruler governing prudently during his lifetime, but upon the ordering of it, that after his death it may maintain himself in being. And he says, it's always easier to persuade rude men. It's not impossible to persuade a civilized man to do so. But it's harder. So here's the point, right? So a good, prudent ruler should plan for the future and how the system can maintain itself. And he's saying, look to Rome, right? Here's some good examples of the Roman Empire. We should institute religions that kind of keep it together. Again, big deal, right? And again, this is what makes Machiavelli not especially popular with moderns, but it doesn't make him wrong, right? Unpopularity and correctness are not correlated. So, and try to think of modern examples where this happens. I think it is true. You need a unifying religious system, because think about it, religion's bigger than ethnicity or city affiliation or that kind of thing. So unity of religion is good. Now, before you get too excited, another reason this book may or may not have disappeared from a lot of shelves, he talks about the next section, which is how important is it to take account of religion, and how Italy has been ruined for the lack of it, thanks to the Roman Church. So not only does he make people who don't like religion not like him, he also then attacks Catholics, which is like the 1-2 punch, right? But if you haven't studied Italian Renaissance history, you'll see why. Let me read this. So those princes and those republics which desire to remain free from corruption should above all else maintain incorrupt the ceremonies of their religion, and should hold them always in veneration. For there can be no surer indication of the decline of a country than to see divine worship neglected. So if we establish that you need the religion to keep a state going, you then need to have the veneration of that religion pure. And if you lose it, you lose the state. Straight up, it's gone. And this is an important point, right? You can't just have a corrupt religion. It has to be a wholesome, venerated religion. Divine worship has to be very well done. Now, why we blame the Catholics for this, I will get to that in 1 second. I lost my slide. Here we go. Yeah. And part of this, too, he says straight up, right, rulers have to maintain the principle. So the rulers of a republic or kingdom, therefore, should uphold the basic principles of religion, which they practice, and if that be done, it will be easy for them to keep their commonwealth religious. So if they are religious, at least in the basics, their commonwealth will also stay religious. And then what's the consequence, right? We're talking politics. It will be good and united. Right, so we just talked about why you should have any religion, but then this is why you should have proper, respectful practice, and then the ruler should at least follow the basics, and genuinely follow it, not just fake it, right? Again, this will keep the republic going. All right. And he also makes the point here that if such a religious spirit can be made by the rulers of Christian commonwealth, Christian states and republics would have been much more united and happy than they are. So if the spirit can be maintained, they'll be unified. But he gives a bunch of examples how they like Rome busted apart, but how also Christian realms do too. And this is where he gets to blame the Church of Rome a bit. And he says, nor if one could form conjecture as to the cause of the decline, can one do better than look at those people who live in the immediate neighborhood of the Church of Rome, which is head of our religion, and see how there is less religion among them than elsewhere. Indeed, should anyone reflect on our religion as it was founded, and then see how it is different from the present usage, he would undoubtedly come to the conclusion that it is approaching either ruin or scourge. So, spoiler, Machiavelli calls the Reformation. Now, why? Now, looking back, it's always easy for Protestant historians to say, look how corrupt the Church of Rome was in the Renaissance, before and after. Why would we say it's corrupt? It was literally a power player with armies and land. And basically, the more they controlled something, the less religious people were. Because, like, getting a job at a church was a corrupt bureaucratic position of the government suddenly, right? And it had an income attached to it from land, right? So there was a lot of corruption. I know my Catholic viewers will be sad about that, but it's just a fact of history. I will say, after Machiavelli, after the Reformation, the church did reform, right? Although this specific problem wasn't fixed until Napoleon invaded Italy, unified it, and took all the land and armies from the church. He had literally beat the church at war. And then after that, we get some modern innovations. But that's not the kind of sphere of this book, but it shows you why Machiavelli is also kind of not popular with Catholics either, right? He's a little bit popular, but I'm a little bit read, but he's not as popular as he would be, because think about it, I'm only 140 pages in this book, and he's already critiquing the church, right? Probably not going to hold him up as a hero, if you see what I mean. All right. And he also points out, he basically blames this church's, the politicizing. He says there are many opinion that the prosperity of Italian cities is due to the Roman Church. I disagree, and he gives basically an argument that first is that owing to the bad example set by the court of Rome, Italy has lost all devotion and religion, and then all the problems that come from that, inconveniences, innumerable disorders, as where there is religion, it may be taken for granted that all is going well, but where the religion is wanting, right, where it's not reverent and true, you take for granted the opposite. So the first debt which we, the Italians, owe the church and to the priests, therefore, is that we have become irreligious and perverse. So in this period, it was the low point for the modern church, anyway, or the early modern church. And, yeah, this is why he's insisting on proper faith, right, and why the rulers themselves should follow it. Not when the whole church itself became a political apparatus, right, that doesn't help religion, especially in their own territories. So they hurt themselves the most. All right. And great, this is just the problem for temporal power. He says, for the church had its headquarters in Italy, and its temporal power, neither its power nor its virtue has been sufficiently great for it to be able to usurp power of all of Italy. So it was never strong enough to conquer everything, right? And the problem is, though, in Italy, the church spent a bunch of its time. Whenever a state would get too strong, it invite an outsider Catholic power to come beat them. It mentions here the Lombards, who were in northern Italy. They almost had real kingship of Italy, and the church basically got Charles the Great to come and invade and beat them and subject them. So this is a constant Italian problem of, like, how do we deal with the church? It's a fair question, right? This is probably the low point for Catholicism in general. So. But again, Machiavelli wants it to be good. That's the kind of key here. All right. This is going to be the last slide, I think, on religion. Yes. Okay. So this is what use did Romans make of religion? We already kind of talked about it, but this section is called What Use the Romans Made of Religion in Organizing the City, Prosecuting the Enterprises, and Composing the Tumults. So he gives a bunch of examples here of religion's great if you have a unified religion for your ability to overcome discord. He gives an example where the plebs got mad. But then at the end he says, nonetheless, Titus Livy shows how the plebs, out of reverence for religion, preferred rather to obey the consul than to believe the tribunes. So, so basically, if you have religious reverence, you can use it to kind of bring peace. A Catholic version of this is probably like, if your bishops are respected, they could probably ask for you know, like peace. It doesn't, but remember, they have to have credibility. And then he says here, religion thus enabled the Senate to overcome difficulties, which otherwise they never would have succeeded in doing. So religion can bring you internal peace, even if there's a true problem, like real corruption. So, of course, if you keep doing that, the institution gets corrupt. So he still insists on a unified religion. This one's super funky, but I had to mention it. Romans and auspices. These are actually like reading the future. The Romans' favorite was watching birds, or watching, what was the word he used here? It's a wizard that uses entrails from, it's like hen pecking. Let me see this. Oh yeah, they're called poultrymen. Whenever they had to fix a day for an engagement with the enemy, they required a poultryman to take auspices. If the poultry pecked, they'd like get the intestines of an offering out, and then if the poultry went to it, it's a good day to fight, and if they didn't, they wouldn't. So the Romans loved these omens, and they Now the question is, what do you do with this, right? So you had to find a way to, if the auspices disagreed with you, how could you be respectful without disparaging the religion? This is important, right? And Machiavelli has a point here for the modern Catholics in his time, how like a ruler can show proper reverence to the tradition, like the basic faith, but when needed, he can twist it a little bit, because sometimes you have to, practically speaking. He mentions a guy called Papyrus, the adroitness of Papyrus. And he was going to get in battle, and he was sure he could win, but the poultrymen just wouldn't give him the go. So what he did was he got the head guy to, like, we should go. Yeah, we should go. Okay, and he convinced him, and then there was some doubt. Some of the poultrymen mentioned that we shouldn't go, and some we should. And Papyrus is like, no, this guy is so confident of his true call, he'll go in the front of the army. And then this guy gets killed. So it's up to the gods. And so they go and fight, and the general ordered this guy to lie. But it was a good day to fight, and he went out and he got killed in the fight. So he got punished for lying, but they still won. Does that make sense? Like, he didn't just make fun of the religion. He twisted it in a smart way. Then we had the opposite of as he says, a rash treatment of this. Let's see, it's in Sicily during the First Punic Wars when they're fighting Carthage. A guy named Appius Pulcher. He's going to engage the Carthaginian army, and the auspices were negative. He said, instead of being like our first guy who politicized, Papyrus was very political about it and kind of maneuvered. Appius, he said, let them see if they won't drink, and he threw the poultry he didn't like into the sea and drowned them. Not the man, but the poultry. And then he attacked and lost. And then he gets condemned. And Papyrus was honored, not so much because one was victorious and the other lost, but because one, contravening the auspices, was prudent and the other rash. So you can sometimes go against kind of predictions as long as you do it right. And he mentions too, it's also part of morale, right? So if you ignore what the prudence, you can just like take the morale. And he mentions the interesting part. The contrary, when you only use it as a last resort or kind of as pure mercenary, it also won't work. He talks about a tribe the Romans fought called the Samnites, and they basically took death oaths, like fight to the death, and they'll never run away. But this was right before they lost, and he mentions it didn't work because it was obviously mercenary, and it was just desperate. So religion is important, but you have to use it like almost genuinely to get the real effect from it. A very interesting point, I think, especially for a guy who's famous for being hypothetically immoral. So I find it very, very compelling. All right, folks, I actually forgot to get a drink, so this is actually perfect timing for an end. This was a short one. Looks like it was 24 minutes. But I'm happy I did it. Just a little side chapter on religion. Our next one, to hook you, this will be the next day or so when I get a chance. It's the transition from servitude to freedom for peoples who start subjected under a prince and servile. Can they be free if you start non-free? Because so far we've only dealt with free people. So how about somebody who starts not free? Can one then become free? And we're going to talk about corruption. It's going to be great. I hope you'll join me for the next one. Thank you all for watching. I'll see you next time. Bye-bye now.